how that's applied within communities, and now how First Nations people are looking after their own collections in the NFSA. Gillian, I just wanted you to talk a little bit, because I'm sure that just about your collection, your job, it's a huge collection. I've been in there and tried to have a radar. Your searching mechanisms are a fuck. I'm sorry, they're really hard.
No, I agree.
But what the content that you do have in there, and kind of like once people put that metadata in, I think it's going to be invaluable resources for cultural people, artists, writers. I think it's a national treasure, really. So could you please just talk about that collection? But then I'd also like you to focus on how you're prioritising the digital preservation strategies there, and how you guys are working through that.
I'd hope to be able to share from a website, though I can't seem to, not sure we can get that happening. So I'm Gillian Moody. My family, I'm a Wadi Yuan and Darwin woman from the south coast of New South Wales. My community is the Wreck Bay community in Jervis Bay. I was adopted and grew up in Sydney, and I reconnected with all of my family when I was 20 years old, so more than half my lifetime. That's giving away my age. Okay.
Yeah.
But I've been in the role now of head of First Nations engagement at the National Film and Sound Archive for the past 3 years. My background is not in archive or academia. I actually come from a filmmaking background, so I've been a filmmaker. I've been an executive in screen agencies and so forth, so I kind of bring an experience level from a different angle into my role. So we see ourselves as the custodians or the safekeepers of about 41,000 items that are in our collection that relate to First Nations people. We still don't know what all of those items are. I've only just recently managed to pull together a small team of 3 other staff that work full-time with me. One of those ladies has just gone off on maternity leave, so we've lost one staff member for the next 12 months, but there's a lot that we're doing. One of the projects that I wanted to talk about initially, which is what I was hoping to show a bit of a clip for, was the partnership that we had in co-designing the digitisation. I hate using the word, but I like to call it the digital return of items, which was with the Strela Research Centre. So the Strela Research Centre had deposited the AV collection of the Strela collection to the NFSA back in 1990, and in 2021, under Tasha James, who was the then Indigenous person within the NFSA, she made contact and collaborated together with the Strela Research Centre and the senior elders from the communities to look at digitising this very important and significant collection. There was, let me just quickly grab my notes. The majority of that collection, we've been given, both Tasha and I were given permission from the senior men and the elders to be able to talk about this project because of our roles within the NFSA, but the majority of that collection is actually sacred, secret men's ceremonial practices, with a small portion of it being for general open public. So in the end, that was a collection of very rare wire recordings, 16mm films, 1/4-inch reels, reel-to-reels, and lacquer discs. And there was all up there ended up being, let me get the actual figures for you. I think it was 1,000 hours of audio and 400 hours of film that was a part of that collection. So that was done as a co-design, and the senior men, if certain things and protocols weren't adhered to or agreed upon, the senior men were ready to pull out of actually having that project go through that digitisation process. So what happened was the senior men came and visited in the Canberra offices at the NFSA, and together with the workers at the NFSA, they created a men's working group. There was about 20 men across the NFSA who would need to, at some point, handle that material. And there was a real belief system in place that each individual item is actually a living, breathing record of ancestors. So it was to be treated with the utmost care and respect. So the men actually signed confidentiality agreements, cultural confidentiality agreements, I'll say, which meant that they weren't allowed to speak about the project. They weren't allowed to go home and tell their wives what they were seeing or hearing and things like that. So there was a huge amount of protocols put around that. When anything was being moved, it was being moved at times of the day where it was having the least amount of impact or exposure to other staff. It was, they were putting, when they were being digitised, the audio suites were blacked out, signage was put up to say, to let people know that work was going on so that no one would enter the space. The outcome. It's been an amazing outcome. I inherited the last year and a half. It was a 4-year project, and during that time, in that final year and a half, a digitisation access studio was built and set up within the Australia Research Centre up in Mabuntua in Alice Springs. The Aboriginal Heritage officers were trained on how to use all of the suites, so none of them had ever done editing, or anything like that. And Frankie Gorry is now that studio is his office. He kind of doesn't leave it. His responsibility was to then sync the sound, the audio with the film. I visited there about 3 or 4 months ago now, 3 months, very quickly for about an hour, and I was just blown away by actually how much he is able to be doing and what the work is that he's now doing now that they have access to all of that material on country. I will say as well, as part of the cultural practice, when the hard drive with all of that data was to be returned, the senior men actually asked for Frankie to come down to Canberra and for Frankie to actually carry that home, and he literally carried it home on his lap on the plane back to Alice Springs. And that was something that we absolutely were in support of, and so he travelled with one of our audio digitisation experts and to make sure that material was kept safe for the whole journey home. Since then, he basically has anywhere from 5 to 15 senior men and young men coming together to access the material, to sit in a room and try and view it and things like that. One of the things that they found is a song line that they'd been singing had been sung incorrectly for several years. They had 2 verses around the wrong way, and so they've been able to correct that song line now and sing the country the right way. He's doing some amazing work in geomapping, so able to geomap the song lines to place, and I was lucky enough to actually see that work, because when I went up to visit, I said, "Am I okay to come in?" And he said yes, and he was so excited because he actually had an open women's songline that he was working on. He said, "I've got a women's one I can show you," and I'm like, "Yay, this is fantastic!" So it was really lovely to actually see just how that has evolved, and when we're talking future, this is the type of work that he's now doing with that material that has been returned. It also has inspired the work that we do elsewhere in the collection as well. So I very quickly kind of identified areas of the collection maybe where we were missing some parts of our story when it comes to First Nations voice in the media. And one of those was with our remote media orgs that are around the country, and the work that they have been doing, significant work that they have been doing in language, in sharing stories both with their communities and then with broader audiences as well. So we've been working with First Nations Media Association to ensure that those orgs and all of their material doesn't get lost. I'm not sure if everyone's aware of the fact that magnetic tape will be obsolete very soon. It was meant to be deadline 2025, we're now in 25. There's still a little bit more of a life on that maybe for the next 5 years. 10 at a stretch. Places like the NFSA and IAXIS, for example, we've been stockpiling all of the equipment that is required for us to be able to digitise these items, but once those heads on those players wear out, they're gone. There is no more, because there are no more companies that are making them. There are no more companies that make the parts anymore. So it's actually, they become obsolete. And I hate it, it's actually really scary to think about. And so we're trying really hard to make sure that we don't miss out on making sure that our First Nation stories, our First Nations languages are all recorded and digitised in that way. We've partnered with CIMA, Torres Strait Islander Media Association, to do their collection, so we're in a 4-year partnership with them currently. I've just come from Gama last night. I was over at Gama, where we were partnering with the Yothu Foundation, because we've been holding in safekeeping a couple of big collections for them, and one of them was around Gama, and it's the collection of about the first 10 years of Gama Festival. And so we pulled out a few of those tapes with Denise Bowden, who's the CEO, and we digitised about 4.5 hours of footage that we then were able to present back in little packages at this year's 25th anniversary. That, sitting on the ground and sitting on chairs in front of that big screen that they had, and being able to sit with the community, was priceless in terms of like being able to see the responses. This is all material that, you know, we were a little concerned at first because it has got many people who have passed away, but there was such openness and generosity of heart around that. And the Yolngu mob up there are very, very much around, you know, not hiding, I found, about celebrating these elders, both past and present, who have actually been amazing leaders in their communities. And so it was really beautiful to see people sitting there saying, that's my uncle, you know, who was a child back 25 years ago, or that's my grandmother, that's my grandfather, and things like that. So that's the sort of thing that just, you know, it brings me a lot of joy when I can see those kind of reactions. Yeah.
Oh, I just wanted to add, I was at Gama and got to see that beautiful screen up, and nobody watched that more than the young